the bane of my existence, the very reason that I am haunted in my sleep at night, the Black Keys. I have suffered over 1,000 rolls to reach this point. In FGO, I hate these with a passion, and that is why they get turned into seed bombs and fed to my servants. Luckily, we're not talking about CEs, we're talking about the lore. And who better to break this lore down than our very own Curry Senpai? That's right, CL from the Burial Agency of the Holy Church. She says that she is an expert when it comes to Black Keys and would be more than willing to give the infamous Nasu dump to all of these rookies. Now, she goes off into how it started way back in 300 AD, back in Europe when the dead was most prevalent at that time. To provide some context, we talked about the dead on the channel years ago, but basically they're foot soldiers of the dead apostle chain. They are the weakest, they're the ones at the bottom. They use their mass numbers to infect people and further empower the dead apostle that turned them, their leader. So if you had to liken them to anything, you can consider them as a Nasuverse version of a zombie. They're still a vampire, but they kind of move in the same way. Going back into Fate Zero in Kirisugu's flashback, you had the entire island being infected when he was growing up. They were the ones running around, causing a mess, incentivizing the Mages Association and the church to pop out and get them dealt with, because if it got any worse and they happened to get off the island, it would have been real bad on their part. Again, I've said this too, if they had made the decision to keep Shirley around, she would be the ringleader of all of the dead on the island, the dead apostle that was over all the ones there, since she's the one that started the infection. But you know, they eventually got that taken care of, so Shirley was never able to grow in that way. Another scenario would be when Kirisugu was working with Natalia and they had to go up against the dead apostle Bozak. You had the scene where everybody on the plane got infected through his bees, and that turned them into the dead there as well. One of the first things that CL brings up is the curse of immortality. As a part of being in the dead apostle chain, they have limited immortality, which means that if you go up against them, you gotta wipe them out in one blow. You can't just do something that's fatal, because even then they will survive, or even worse, rejuvenate if enough damage isn't done. That's the problem. The mass numbers that the dead were coming in is what was making it difficult for the Holy Church. And in 300 AD, the dead were around more than ever. So what happened was the best swordsmen and priests around this time came up with an effective way to get rid of the dead with as little effort as possible. That being the Black Keys and other items. My question now is, who the hell is that? This is one of those things where it's like, you come for answers and now you have even more questions. It could be an OC, could be a real character. I'm willing to bet that it probably is an OC, since most of the main church are all OC characters. But you do have some people like Shiro Kotomine, who is Amakusa Shiro. He was a real person. He fought in the Shimabara Rebellion. You got Pierre Calkin from the 100 Years War, the one that had Joan burned to death. And then you have Joan too. So I really want to see that more explored. He went out of his way to give us a specific date, so there's got to be something to that. In general, the dead apostles can be taken down by regular weapons, and the main thing that the church wants to do is still purify the souls of the people that have been turned. In theory, the church agents could go around locking the dead into buildings and just burning the whole building to the ground, but as we all know, that's not practical. You would need a building every time that you're around the dead, and you would need the resources to pull it off. Not to mention, it would make the church go bankrupt, at least according to CL. That's definitely cap, but I am willing to entertain the thought. So this is where the Black Keys come in. The Black Keys are prayers. They are literal scriptures taken out of the Holy Bible. Since the dead have now reached the inhuman state, they can't purify them the way that they would normally. They're not what they used to be. Words aren't going to reach them. The Black Keys allow the members from the church to, at the very least, send that same message through their body and release them. They're not supposed to be used as a sword. They're very lightweight, and they just happen to come out in the form of blades. More so, they've been likened to using a bow and arrow than anything. They take a ton of skill to use, meaning that the output will always be different unless the agents are around the same level. I kid you not, she tells us that it takes 10 full years just to master these weapons. That's why most of the members who aren't qualified enough opt for using an easier weapon. Just the fact that a person pulls out Black Keys should tell you a lot about their skill skill in and of itself. That should tell you a lot about the people that we've seen using them, and we're about to go through some of those right now. You have the fight of Tsiah against Hassan, where he talks about how black keys are actually just hilts with magical energy woven out of them. This energy being based in a different theory from the standard magecraft and rooted in the practices of the church, the holy sacraments. Their idea of magecraft is strictly through prayer and holy weapons. You know, true miracles, turning water into wine. He came to the fight with 10 keys on him. Pablo Codamine, 5 on his left, 5 on his right. Not only was he able to get the upper hand on a servant as a human, but he left Hassan immobilized with his keys while turning around and dealing with Zokin on top of that. They're mentioned to be extremely useful against things that the church see as evil, such as ghosts or other unnatural phenomena, and with Hassan technically being a ghost, Ren herself called servants ghost liners, it was no wonder that they gave him such a hard time. This is even more impressive on Ksiray's part because he had just negated Hassan's phantasm, the same phantasm that one-shotted Ku, and he used it as leverage to get the keys off. He was using his keys to go blow for blow with Hassan's dirks, which we know are faster than bullets. His only drawback was that he couldn't finish him off with the keys. Contrary to the dead, servants require a little bit more muscle. Not too long before that, we saw Shiro reinforce his black key to be hard as a diamond. This did prove to be ineffective at the time because he was up against Heracles. But if that wasn't the case, this definitely could work well against somebody who's actually human. Moving on to the brief interaction between Amakusa and Frankenstein, where he starts to use the keys in a different way. Now, the keys weren't doing anything to Frankenstein on a physical level, but on a mental level, you can tell that she was starting to get frustrated. At least 10 of them were thrown, but we also find that he injected binding spells into the hilt of the keys that would allow them to stagnate and come back to the target after they've been deflected. So even if she managed to get them out the way, he had the choice to bring them right back to her. And she did not want to chance it. He made her resort to using her spell Bridal Chest just so she didn't get hit. If you remember the Wall of Swords that was created by Kuro or Emiya, Amakusa has shown the ability to do the same thing with his keys. In order to slow Frankenstein down, he placed a wall of black keys in front of her and then turned them to a colossal size. You have the interactions between Hansa and Jester, where Hansa is taking Jester head on with his black keys despite the fact that they're supposed to be used as projectiles. Jester, or Dorothea of course, being a very powerful dead apostle. Hansa was out here dicing through entire walls of rubble with his keys and going against his vampire claws close range. With Jester being a dead apostle, we already know that he's at least superhuman strength. Hansa's going against him with the handicap and he still managed to make the keys effective. You got Ksiray versus Kirisugu, where Ksiray was reinforcing his keys with his command spells. Doing this, he managed to pull off the impossible, straight up negating Kirisugu's origin bullets, which we know are extremely powerful. Just one direct shot from these bullets was enough to send generations worth of magecraft of Canaan down the drain. And here you have Ksiray just taking them head on. Tsiah has already brought up the fact that the potential for the black keys is endless. The stronger the user is and the more magical energy that's being put into them, the more powerful they are. Let's not even talk about the fact that he blocked multiple shots from Kirisugu's Calico using his keys with pure skill alone. Surely you're joking. You have the interactions between Ksiray and Maya. Despite all of her military expertise, Maya was getting outdone up close with his keys while she had a knife and a machine gun. I mean, just bulldozing her. You have the unique case with Ciel, being one of the few members that can manifest nearly 100 keys at one time. The reason being is that unlike most members, she can manifest her keys straight through the Bible itself, which gives her room for a bigger arsenal. You have Karubo over in Case File, who is also an executor for the church. He's been shown doing a multitude of things with his black keys outside of combat and then fighting with them on top of that. You have situations where he's channeled his energy into the ley line with his keys, rituals for locating items, blocking head-on magic bullets from Olga in her youth, taking on the child of one of the dead apostle ancestors, all of this just using his keys. Ciel has mentioned out of all the holy armaments, the black keys was the earliest one of the time back in 300 AD. It's seen several different variations. The ones that we see now are just the most recent and and the most preferred to the members that we currently have. There are certain techniques that you can do with the Black Keys. You have Noelle, who works for the church. She's a new addition in the Tsukihime remake. You guys can skip ahead if you still wanted to read that. She makes use of an anti-vampire bounded field, or a holy barrier, that can straight up melt any vampire that's too weak to touch it. Basically, anything that's in parameter of the keys that she sets down will become the dimensions for the barrier. In the story, we saw her do this with an entire room, turning it into a melting pot for any of the vampires that tried to get out. You have the iron plate effect, which allows you to use martial skill to increase the impact once the keys land. We saw Tsiah use this against Arkaway, knocking her back 10 meters when she was caught off guard with just one key. In the original, it used to be a secret technique, but as of the remake, it's become more of a normal art. It applies pure skill, meaning there's no spell casting involved, and it can go as far as piercing straight through concrete, knocking down walls and all. You have the cremation rite technique, which is an added prayer spell that you can find in the Tsukihime dictionary. This causes the target to burst into flames upon contact. We saw Tsiah use this against Arkaway, detailing a heat of up to 500 degrees Celsius. Somebody get the sweet baby rays. You have the intermittent rite, which allows you to petrify your target upon impact. So think that this would work like Medusa's mystic eyes, for instance. You have the excarnation rite, which allows you to bring forth countless crows and make them target the opponent's body. And you have the mummification rite, which rips moisture out of the target's body, which in turn would affect a lot of other things that you have going on with your vitals. In the fight when Tsiah was going against Arkaway, and this is one of the reasons why Tsiah is so good, she has access to a lot of magecraft and the holy spells too. She has access to the holy barriers. They can be used offensively the way that Noelle did it, or they can be used for defense to block out attacks. The story itself going as far to say that a normal living thing couldn't get through them. Even when Arkaway broke her Black Keys, the barriers still took effect. You can just throw dummy keys on purpose and have somebody break them, and then the residual Black Keys around them will trap them inside. Just like that, you sealed your own fate. And Tsiah can take it a step further by applying magecraft to her holy spells, the taboo, and turn her barrier into something known as the Gothic Fort. The move is based from one of the ancestors. It conceptually recreates the barrier into the Strasbourg Cathedral. The story telling us that it's the largest tower of the Middle Ages. We've even gotten word that this can trap the dead apostle ancestors for a short amount of time. It's that lethal. The hardness, the size, she said herself that this can be 30 kilometers high, and it can be condensed to compress the target, and she can put them in there for at least an hour, and that's just through the context of their fight. Unfortunately, Arkaway is wicked, so this isn't the best example, but again, if she was using it against somebody else, it'd be a bad time. Other techniques include shadow manipulation, time manipulation, and some that we still yet to see. As far as the relative use of the Black Keys, Tsiah explained that the real world Gutenberg press did have the Black Keys pick up a little bit in the story, but after a while the firearms started to take over back in the 1400s, and this resulted in a lot less Black Keys being used. There still are a lot of church members that have these as their go-to. Again, usually they are some of the best ones, so if you see them, you know what's going down.